Hello and welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kingsley Jackson, and I'm an academic resolution specialist here at UAGC. I'll be the host for this session titled The Role Scaffolding Plays in Student Success and Faculty Satisfaction. By joining us today, you do acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted during this presentation, but we do encourage you to post your questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled live transcription. If you would like to use it, click the live transcription button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I'm pleased to introduce to you Jennifer Zauer, lead faculty member in our Early Childhood Education AA program, Dr. Amy Johnson, lead faculty member in both our Early Childhood Education and Early Childhood Education Administration programs, and Dr. Allison Reef, Associate Director within our Academic Engagement Center. Let's welcome our speakers at this time.
Thanks, Kingsley. We are going to share with you our presentation about the role scaffolding plays in student success and faculty satisfaction. This is based on a redevelopment of a course within an early childhood program, and it's called ECD 315. So we will just dig right into the content. Two techniques that we heavily relied upon for the redevelopment of ECD 315 were scaffolding and metacognition. The term scaffolding comes from Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, which is often referred to as the ZPD. He defined this as the distance between the actual development levels as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. Obviously, Vygotsky was studying this in the context of children, but it can be applied to people of any age. The elements that you put in place to support the learner within the ZPD are considered scaffolds for learning. You are supporting the learner until they are ready to stand on their own, just like this building is being supported by those scaffolds. Another concept that strongly guided our work in our course redesign was metacognition. When we tap into cognition, we are asking what we need to learn. With metacognition, it is how we go about learning what we need to learn. How can we maximize what we are learning? As online educators, this is often a hard task as it's very difficult to see and hear this part of the learning process remotely and asynchronously. In the original course design, we asked our students to reflect on their learning and improve it by taking instructor feedback into account and making adjustments to their work that would then become part of their final project. However, we were seeing the same mistakes that were made originally, then being made in the final project. We had to improve the students' ability to reflect on their learning, identify mistakes, and adjust their work. We did this by providing more scaffolding, breaking the work into smaller pieces, and decreasing the number of tasks so instructors could provide more detailed feedback and students could have more time to reflect on that feedback. We'll circle back to what this looks like in the course in just a bit. But before we do that, let's hear from Amy as she describes how we also utilize collaboration in the course design process.
Adjunct faculty is a crucial part of our college, so we wanted to be sure and get their thoughts on the course redesign. But before we asked for input, we put in extra time to build relationships with our faculty. I get to know the associate faculty who teach the courses I lead and design. I ask about their families and interests and build connections around those areas. And I give each of them a highlight week so others can get to know them as well. I've built a strong connection with many of them, and we now freely interact on a personal level. For instance, I recently received an email from an adjunct marked "Important alert for you." I opened it a little worried to find a reminder that Survivor was airing that evening. We discussed it through email on Thursday, so it was important that I tuned in. Another adjunct told me that he enjoyed my presence in the last training because I sat so still. My camera wasn't on and he was complimenting the stillness of my profile picture. He also asked if he looked okay because he'd just gotten his hair done for the meeting, but he's completely bald. The time I take building these relationships makes my job more enjoyable. I love having a larger group of people who I can play with, bounce ideas off of, and depend upon. Jen also builds strong relationships with the faculty who teach her courses. So when Jen and I send a letter asking for input on a class, we receive honest feedback. When there's no relationship, it feels like a power divide. When I was an adjunct faculty, I never knew what I could actually say. I wanted to get hired someday, so should I be honest or only provide happy, fluffy thoughts? But when Jen and I speak with our associate faculty, we're able to get honest answers because of the relationships we've built. For this course, we asked these specific questions. What do you enjoy teaching about the current version of the course? Where do you see your students having success or struggle in the course? Are there concepts in the course you don't think need to be covered? And are there concepts that are not in the course that really should be? Do you have any other general feedback to share about the class? Overall, the associate faculty reported that creating lesson plans and a thematic unit was a crucial part of the class. But unless the student already has an understanding of writing lesson plans, they really struggle with it. Specifically, the students in the class struggle with coming up with a theme, writing measurable objectives, identifying, labeling standards, differentiation, and aligning assessments. So basically every part of the lesson planning. In the redesign, we kept items that the associate faculty spoke highly of, like lesson planning practice, and we focused on changing things they reported as difficult for the students. When we ask our faculty for feedback, we respect that feedback and thoroughly consider each item. As we said, our students have difficulty with lesson planning, and this was something we kept at the forefront when designing the course. In lesson planning assignments for the old version of the course, students are provided with a detailed 28-page lesson plan handbook that breaks down each part and purpose of the lesson plan. Additionally, there are shorter directions provided, like pictured in the middle, and a lesson plan template for the student. But even with these resources, students still have difficulty. And one possible reason could be because the entire lesson plan was required before feedback is given. As Ali shared earlier, scaffolding content in a course is essential in helping students master the course learning outcomes. Knowing this, combined with our knowledge of backwards design, allowed us to strategically build this course in a manner that would contribute to greater student success. The three main ways we did this were by beginning with the end in mind, creating a summative that would allow our students to build on the work they were doing each week, and giving more feedback. So before, they used to create an entire lesson at once, but now they create bits and pieces, receiving feedback on just those parts before moving on. The students receive feedbacks on lesson elements 3 times before their summative assignment, as opposed to just 1 time in the previous version of the course. And Jen will now share more ways we use scaffolding in the class.
Thanks so much, Amy. So another way that we use scaffolding in this course redesign was to really consider and think about the way in which we were presenting information. Were we giving our students the information in manageable chunks and in meaningful chunks that allowed them to really understand the initial key concepts before building on and adding to those concepts? And we did this by taking and breaking things down, not only into smaller chunks, but also by presenting the information in different formats. So here's an example of where we integrated some quiz and videos to help make sure that our students understood the different sections and components of a lesson plan prior to being asked to write them. So the students had the readings of the handbook that Amy had talked about. We created videos where we walked through and broke down each chunk of the lesson plan. The students watched the videos. They had opportunities to answer questions to make sure that they could check their understanding about those different sections of the lesson plan. And if they didn't get it correct, then we had a reteach moment where they were redirected to have another opportunity to learn and master and understand the content. Another example of a way that we scaffolded is that once the students had a week where they had gone through and learned about each of the components of the lesson plan and what they were and really, the definition and purpose of those sections, then we dug deeper into how do you write each of those sections. And in this particular example, we created an interactive with our media team where they went through a branching scenario where they were posed a question, had the chance to correctly respond. If they didn't get it correct, we redirected them back to a video so they could have a teachable moment to relearn that content. And then they would get directed back to another opportunity to practice and apply that information. And we set this conversation up as a conversation between a mentor teacher and a new teacher to try and also mirror the experiences that they would see in the real world when they were working on developing lessons, and that idea of going to a mentor to seek guidance when you're working to create those lessons. So a lot of opportunities to scaffold and provide teachable moments and reteaching to ensure mastery of content prior to our students being asked to demonstrate their mastery by creating their thematic unit in the course. We also brought this scaffolding into our discussion forums each week. So for example, in the early weeks of the course, the students learned that part of a lesson plan is incorporating state standards. So we wanted to provide our students the opportunity to really discover and understand what standards are. And for those of you who might not be familiar with state standards, they vary by each state. So we had the students go out and discover and look at their standards for their particular state. And we gave them the opportunity to share with us, what was something that was surprising about your standards? What was something that was confusing about your standards? And this helped us to see where did they really dig in, and it gave our students a safe space and an opportunity to share and highlight what was confusing to them so that we could then come in and help provide some support to clarify any places that they were confused or misconceptions that they might have about standards, so we could help to set them up for success as in future weeks they would have to select and pick standards to use in their lessons. On the right-hand side of the screen is another example of where we work to build in some scaffolding into our discussion forums. The students at this point in the class had written part of a lesson in week 3, and we asked them to pull out their objective and their assessment from their lesson and to do some reflection as to whether or not those two sections of their lesson were aligned. And the students either had to be able to prove why they were aligned, or if they weren't, they had to stop and say, oh my goodness, I realized they're not aligned. And then they had to modify what they had done in order to create alignment. So it really built in that opportunity for students to get feedback along the way, to have some correction, and for them to discover, and I'll share some other examples. This example kind of blends some of that scaffolding and metacognition, but to bring those opportunities in to really get them thinking about their thinking and make it meaningful to them, and for them to take some ownership over their own learning. We also worked in to really incorporate some opportunities for metacognition. Coming from a third grade classroom, I would do this with my students all the time, and I could have conversations with them and have them explain their thinking to me. So we thought about how could we bring that metacognition into our course design. And in this particular example, this is from that same discussion forum where I was talking about where they had to justify whether or not there was alignment in their lesson. And you can see in the section highlighted in yellow that the student said, after reading through my objective and assessment, I could see many things wrong with the alignment. I changed my objective per the professor's suggestion, but did not remove some of the details. So they're saying, I saw where I made a mistake. I was able to incorporate the feedback from my instructor and modify what I had done. So we were looking for ways to get them to demonstrate their thinking about their thinking so that we could kind of, see what was going on and see where we could continue to lend and provide support. And with that, I am going to hand things back over to Amy to share a little bit about some of the data that we collected in regards to what we saw with student performance and student voice regarding some of these changes.
We asked the students after the class ended, hypothetically, course A presents material in different ways, such as reading, videos, interactives, etc. And course B presents material in just one way. Which class might better support your learning? And as you can see, course A better supported, course A better supported their learning in that hypothetical situation. And so then we said, this class was actually designed so that the learning material built upon itself. That's what the interactives were doing. That's what the videos were doing. It was all in a step-by-step manner. How do you think this scaffolding impacted your learning in the course? And you can see that it helped them significantly or it helped them more.
So along with getting the students' feedback on what their thoughts were regarding some of the changes, the way that we scaffolded content, giving them a variety of modalities for the information, we were curious also as to whether or not this actually impacted student success. So when you look at this graph, it shows the week 2, week 3, and week 5 assignment, because those are the assignments that are scaffolded throughout the course. They start their thematic unit in week 2. They build on that unit in week 3, and then finally they, revise and continue to build on it in week 5 for their summative assignment. And what we discovered was that these strategies were impacting student success. So when we look at the number of students who scored distinguished and proficient from week 2 to week 5 on this assignment, we saw an 8% increase in the number of students that were scoring proficient and distinguished on the assignment, an 8% increase in growth from how they performing proficient and distinguished in week 2 through week 5. So definitely an impact in their success. And then we also saw, not only did we see more students that were moving up from proficient to distinguished, but we saw that the number of students who were scoring non-performance and even that below expectations category, that dropped 6% from week 2 to week 5. So we saw students that, had somewhat of an idea and that were doing well continue to increase their knowledge. And then we saw those students that were really struggling in the earlier weeks of the course start to have some success and better understanding of the content, as well as the course moved on from all of that scaffolding.
And as we shared some of the quantitative data about student experience, we also really valued the comments that the students were able to provide about their experience. Repeatedly, we saw that the scaffolding of assignments with building their lesson plans week by week was really highly appreciated. They were less frustrated and produced higher quality work because they had time to fully understand each element before moving on to the next piece. The depth of their knowledge increased, and the level of their understanding went from being able to identify solid elements of lesson planning to being able to create their own. This also related to the last student comment on this slide by showing that it's very applicable to students. Many of our students are asked to create lesson plans on a daily basis for their job. They were able to learn how to do this properly and apply it to their own professional lives, which makes us as faculty extremely happy. We also sought out some feedback from faculty who regularly teach this course, which is a small pool, so you'll see the numbers aren't extremely large here. But one question related to how satisfied they were with the interactives, the videos, and scaffolded assignments. As you can see, satisfaction was high. Not only are students more successful with the built-in scaffolds and reteaching opportunities, but the faculty were given the gift of time. They did not have to provide feedback for an entire unit each week. Provide in-depth feedback to each element so that the product was much higher quality. So that's a win-win for all. And that brings us to the end of our presentation about our scaffolded approach to course redevelopment. If anyone has any questions, we're happy to go ahead and answer those now. Or if anybody has any thoughts about something they're currently redeveloping, we'd love to hear about that. With a lot of our course developments happening right now, we're interested to know what other people are doing.
Hi, Allie, it's Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
Can you hear me okay? Hi. So I loved when I saw the data around the faculty satisfaction with the grading, the lighter grading in those for one, I think you said one assignment for each week. And that's something that we've incorporated in our new Gen 101 course, where we are giving faculty time in those first 2 weeks to build those relationships and dive in and have those opportunities to dive into those discussions. And so I'm happy to hear kind of what specifically do you think we could, how can we support our faculty to make sure that they take advantage of those opportunities? So what are some things that we could maybe incorporate in our faculty training for the course redesign?
That's a really good point. Just because we free up the time with this doesn't mean that they'll use it to provide better feedback. So I think pointing those elements out. In Amy's always our poster child here for the connection she builds with our associate faculty members, because that I think is really important. If you can build those connections and then have open communication with them, that's a great way to start a conversation. Amy or Jen, do you have any ideas on what you would suggest for Teresa?
I'll notice things that my associate faculty are doing in their classes, and I'll ask if I could share that in just a Google Doc. So every so often I'll send out to my associate faculty, if you want to see the amazing things that are going on in the other classrooms, click here, and it'll have a list of their peers' names and just a link to, they can't see in the class, but it's a link to something that I've housed that's really impressive in the class. And so they can just look at that document and see 30 really cool things that are going on that they never would know about otherwise.
I think that's really great advice, Amy. And I know Amy, like Ali said, she's a master at building those connections. I think something else that's really valuable with the feedback, Teresa, in a course like this that has so much scaffolding, is to make sure that your associate faculty really understand those scaffolded components of the course, right? So for example, in the particular assignment in this course that's scaffolded from week 2 to week 3 to week 5, there's the lesson plan component that's the thematic unit, but then each week there's also a narrative section where they're demonstrating some understanding and mastery of key concepts related to curriculum as a whole. So when I'm helping associate faculty who are teaching this particular course with feedback, I want them to make sure that the bulk of their feedback that they're giving is constructive feedback that's going to help them master skills they were struggling with so that they can incorporate it into the part of the assignment they're building on for the next week. That doesn't mean that we aren't giving feedback on the sections that, are demonstrating some understanding about, for example, like how do what does equity look like in curriculum, et cetera, things like that, but that they're balancing their feedback between feedback that's going to be taken and used and applied into those next pieces that are scaffolded, along with, some feedback of, yes, your understanding of this particular concept is clear, or, here's maybe a resource to help, but really trying to highlight where you want them to spend their time so that that feedback is meaningful and valuable to the students and they can take it and apply it to the next project. That was a great question, Teresa.
Well, thank you. That was something I needed to know. I've learned. So I have a whole page of notes on Amy, the guru of building relationships. I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. So thank you very much.
I think also being really deliberate about design is something that is not, I'll just speak for myself. I was going to say as a whole, we might need to do that better. But I know when I'm thinking about things, it's clear in my head, but it might not be clear to others. And so that means being very transparent with students and transparent with the faculty who teach the course the most, meaning like they need to understand why it was created and how it actually maps. And I've taught, courses like this where everything does kind of work up to the final project where they've been getting feedback along the way. And I've had students say to me, can I use the stuff I created in these other weeks in my final project? I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, of course you can, but that's not on them. That's on me for not making it clear enough to them that their work is building up to that final project. So I think being deliberate with design, and it's okay to share the way courses are developed and designed, and making that known to the faculty who teach it and the students who are taking it.
Yes, and one of the things, Ali, that I've created is a Google form that I'm sending to all the instructors. So to get that real-time feedback that you just mentioned. And so I hope that's an effective way to get that, but I'm planning to send a form where they can say, this is where the pain points are. This is working really well, so that we can kind of tweak things if we need to, because a course only works as well, like you said, it works well in our heads. We spend all this time writing the course guide and all that, but you're right, if we don't really spend time getting that feedback from real-time users. So thank you very much.
I love that approach, Teresa, because, sometimes when you're grading a course, you're like, is it only my students that are struggling with X piece? Or I wonder if other students in other courses are struggling with it too. So having that form is a great way for faculty to be able to easily reach out to say, hey, Teresa, I'm noticing a pattern. Are you noticing this same pattern too?
All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, we'll give you 5 minutes to eat something, use the restroom before you hit the next session. You can always contact us, just our names at UAGC, and we're happy to chat more.
Just a quick thank you to our presenters today. I appreciate all the information, all the knowledge you shared with us. As you said, Dr. Rifa, already, thank you everyone for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your TLC experience. Bye-bye.